to order and do the roll call. Or would you like to do the swearing in before that? I'm not sure how you want to do that. I think Craig is managing it.
I think swearing in before roll call makes sense to me. Craig?
Okay, sounds great.
I think that's how you did it at the last meeting. Is that right?
Mhm.
We can do the same thing. Who are we starting with, Nellie?
Are we able to do all of our new board members and alternates at once if they all raise their hands, or do we go one by one?
I'll sort of defer. At a meeting yesterday, which I think some of the participants here today were at, we did a couple of at the same time. So if in the interest of expediency, I'm happy to do everyone at the same time today.
We've done it at the same time
At the very least, we can confirm who I'm swearing in.
Yes. If those new board members, I see you all around, if you could raise your hand in the Zoom application, I think that will make it easiest around. Please and thank you.
All right, well, I'll go ahead for those folks who I'm, if you could please unmute yourselves and raise your right hand. I state your name.
Amaranth Lee,
I, Leslie Ragsdale,
Do solemnly swear or affirm
do
do
solemnly
solemnly swear
that I will support and defend
that I will support and defend
the Constitution of the United States
the Constitution of the United States
and the Constitution of the State of California
and the Constitution of the State of California
against all enemies, foreign and domestic,
against all enemies, foreign and domestic,
that I will bear true faith and allegiance
and that I will bear true faith and allegiance
to the Constitution of the United States
to the Constitution of the United States
and the Constitution of the State of California,
and the Constitution of the State of California,
that I take this obligation freely
that I take this obligation freely
without any mental reservation or purpose of evasion,
without any mental reservation or purpose of evasion,
and that I will well and faithfully discharge
and that I will well and faithfully discharge
the duties upon which I am about to enter.
the duties upon which I am about to enter.
Congratulations.
Thank you.
Okay. Let me go ahead and do a roll call and see that we're all set. So when I call your jurisdiction, if you'll please state your name. San Mateo County,
Dave Pine,
San Mateo County, Atherton,
Rick DeGolia.
Belmont,
Jim Yates.
Brisbane,
Colleen Mackin.
Burlingame,
Donna Colson,
thank you, Colma, Daly City, East Palo Alto,
Sorry, Carlos Romero.
thank you, Foster City,
Sam Hindi,
Half Moon Bay,
Harvey Rohrback,
Hillsborough,
Leslie Ragsdale,
Los Banos, Menlo Park,
Betsy Nash.
Millbrae,
Anders Fung,
Pacifica,
Christine Bowles.
you, Portola Valley,
Jeff Alfs,
Redwood City,
Homer Martinez,
San Bruno,
Marty Medina,
San Carlos,
John Dugan,
San
Pranita Cash,
Pranita, I see that you're here as well. If you want, after we do the roll call, we could do a swearing in for you as well.
I actually did it with you guys.
Oh, okay, great, thank you. San Mateo,
Amaranth Lee,
you, South San Francisco, and Woodside. Director Emeritus, sorry,
Gupta,
thank you, and Director Emeritus.
John Keener.
Wonderful, thank you, and we have a quorum.
Great.
and
Welcome,
also
Mayor.
Daly City here as well. Thank you.
Great. Welcome everyone to the first meeting of the year, and especially welcome to all of our new members. This is always a big change when we come into January. This year is a particularly large change, so I welcome all of you. The staff is in the process of planning a series of trainings, many of which are self-serving on the web. PCE is a very complex business, and I strongly encourage all of you to take advantage of the training that the staff offers, because it has been excellent for all of us that have taken it. The first item on the agenda is public comment. If you have public comment, you can click the reactions button and raise your hand. I don't currently see any public comment. Okay, so we will move on. Can I get a motion to set the agenda and approve the consent items?
So moved. Oh, second, May.
Okay, thank you, Harvey. Thank you, Julia. And just let me clarify, if anybody wishes to pull anything from the consent items, please raise your hand and let me know. Okay, I don't see that, so let's do a roll call.
San Mateo County,
Yes.
San Mateo County, Atherton,
Yes.
Belmont,
Yes.
Brisbane,
Yes.
Burlingame,
Yes.
Colma, Daly City.
Yes.
East Palo Alto,
Yes.
Foster City,
Yes.
Half Moon Bay,
Yes.
Hillsborough,
Yes.
Los Banos, Menlo Park,
Yes.
El Rey,
Yes.
Pacifica,
Yes.
Portola Valley,
Yes.
Redwood City,
Yes.
San Bruno,
Yes.
San Carlos,
Yes.
San
Yes.
Mateo,
Yes.
South San Francisco, and Woodside. The motion passes. Thank you.
Oh, there we go. Okay, the next item on the agenda is the chair report. I really don't have a report tonight, other than we've got a few committees that we're going to ask people to volunteer for. They'll be not greatly time consuming. They're short-term nominating committee for chair and vice chair, and for the Citizens Advisory Committee, and we'll get to those on the agenda. So the next item is the CEO report.
Thank you, Rick, and welcome to all of our new board members. It's great to have you here, and Happy New Year to all of our returning board members. It's great to see all of you as well. So next slide, please. So I wanted to provide a welcome to our latest new hire, who is Cassius Gray. He's our IT systems and support administrator. He started this week, and you'll be seeing him more as we return to in-person meetings starting in March. So Cassius is going to be a great addition to our team. Next slide. We are still looking for more people for the team. Currently posted on our website are openings for the Director of Power Resources, the Director of Marketing and Community Relations, Human Resources Manager, and an Administrative Assistant. And soon we will be posting additional job openings for Power Resources Analysts or Specialists, basically entry-level positions in our Power Resources team. So again, if you know anyone who might be a great addition to Peninsula Clean Energy, please send them our way. Oops, sorry. Okay, next slide, please. So Tuesday, we had our fourth all-staff in-person meeting, and here we are at Allied Arts in Menlo Park. The team is growing. We had a great time together. It was great to see everyone and to meet the new members of our team. And we're doing great stuff, and just amazed at what this organization is able to do, and what the amazing contributions that we have from our staff. And you see that all the time when you come to the board members and you see what all of the staff members are reporting on. So here we are. Next slide, please. So we wanted to let you know that we are supporting the Coastside community from the tragedy that happened, and we're providing support for the farm workers with donations to ALAS and Coastside Hope. These were two organizations that SAMCETA suggested that people could work with to help the community. So as part of the community, we wanted to make sure that we were helping.
Thank you, Jan.
We're very sorry for the tragedy. It's just unbelievable. Next slide, please. We wanted to update you, and you'll be getting more information about this later on in our reports tonight. But you may recall back a year ago, in January of 2022, we approved the first contract that we're doing through CC Power, the Tumbleweed Long Duration Storage Project. This is it started as a 69 megawatt project, and it has now been expanded to 75 megawatts. And our share is expanding from actually 13.59 megawatts to 15 megawatts. So back in January of 2018, you approved our participation at 13.59 megawatts with the possibility that it could increase 25% if another member dropped out or if there was a change in the project. And you also approved a certain not to exceed amount. So neither of those are being exceeded in this change, this expansion to the project. And so we just wanted to let you know that that was happening. Sarah will provide more details tonight, but because you already approved this, we are not coming back for further approval from you, but just to update you that this project is expanding, which is great. We're very happy about that. Next slide, please. So as things are moving along in Sacramento, we have found out that there are some new members who will be on the Assembly Committee on Utilities and Energy. This committee reviews all bills that have to do with energy. And so the 3 of these 4 new members do have CCAs in their communities, which is a good thing, we hope. Lisa Calderon is from the City of Industry and has about 100,000 customers from Clean Power Alliance in her district. Damon Connolly is from Marin, so that's Marin Clean Energy. Pilar Chiavo is from Santa Clarita and also has residents who are customers of the Clean Power Alliance and Cal Choice down in SoCal. Greg Wallace is from San Bernardino, and he probably does not have residents that are members of CCAs, but 3 of the 4 do, so that's a good thing. However, things are complicated there. The Speaker of the Assembly is going to change on July 1st, so the chairs and the committee members could all change on July 1st as well. So there may be a lot of activity going on in Sacramento, and we'll just have to watch and see how things go. Next slide, please. So tonight, we're going to be asking you for the approval of the engineering and construction contract for the first cohort of solar plus storage projects on municipal buildings, and also the power purchase agreements between us and each jurisdiction for the solar power. And as we have mentioned in the past, we're also getting the next cohort of projects together. And we've been reaching out to all of you. We've sent emails to you, and Carlos and Peter Levitt from our staff have been reaching out to you to get more details. But I just wanted to let you know again, in case there are facilities in your city or other public facilities such as school district facilities, water treatment and wastewater facilities, transit agencies, any kind of public building that might benefit from having a solar system. We're trying to get all those projects identified by January 31st in order to get those to qualify for NEM 2.0, because we need to get the interconnection applications into PG&E before April 15th. Otherwise, they're going to roll over into NEM 3.0, which is not as advantageous. So again, let us know if you can think of a project, or if there's if one comes to mind. And let us know tomorrow or Monday, please. Next slide. So we have a number of ad hoc subcommittees composed of board members. And if any of you are marketing specialists or are interested in our marketing subcommittee, please let Nellie know. And the next time we get that subcommittee together, we will make sure that you are included on that. And then last but not least, the next set of upcoming meetings will be in February, the Citizens Advisory Committee on February 9th, Audit and Finance and Executive Committee on February 13th, and the Board of Directors on February 23rd. These will be Zoom meetings. These will be the last Zoom meetings, because starting in March, the public meetings will require that the members be there in person. And so we will be having those meetings at our offices starting again in March, and we'll be getting more information out to you about all of that. So that's all I have to report tonight. Is there anyone who has a question or wants more clarification on anything?
John Keener.
Jan, the open director of power resources position, I thought you had a good candidate for that. What's the situation on that position?
We are close, but we have
Okay.
not finalized anything yet. So until it's signed on the dotted line, we're keeping that open. But hopefully within a week or so, that we'll have that settled.
Okay, thank you.
Actually, one other thing I didn't talk about tonight, but I want to share. As you all know, we published our 24/7 paper on Tuesday, January 10th, about achieving 24/7 renewables. And we've had a lot of great response from that. And we've been sending some of that out to you. I did a podcast a couple of weeks ago, and a lot of people heard that, and we've been getting more responses. I actually participated in a Zoom call with some people in Europe yesterday, and they're a little bit farther ahead of the US on thinking about 24/7, but they were very impressed by the work that we did. I also was at Stanford today, and there's a lot of areas that they would like to collaborate with us on that. We've also heard from NREL. So I just want to let you know that there's a lot of interest in what we're doing, and we'll probably be coming back to you and reporting out further on the places we can go with what we're doing for the 24/7 work.
Yeah.
And that's it. So any other questions or comments?
I don't see any other questions and comments, although I'll just comment that I have gotten quite a number of comments from people who really appreciate that the tool that PCE has made available, publicly available to anyone who wishes to use it, so that they can model the 24/7 type of strategy. I think that's incredibly important. And I think the big challenge for us is to get that fully distributed, at least the information about it distributed throughout the entire load serving community. It's a big project.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you, Jan. The next item is the Citizens Advisory Report, which I'm sure Cheryl will be providing.
Yes. Good evening, Chair DeGolia and members of the board. The Citizens Advisory Committee met Thursday, January 12th. I suggested members review PCE's recent white paper that Jan just mentioned and share within their networks how we'll provide 24/7 renewable energy by 2025. I asked if PCE could develop email or social media materials that we could use to tout this exciting achievement. Congratulations to PCE's amazing modeling team for this cutting edge work. We absorbed an inspirational case study by one of our own. CAC member Kathleen Goforth explained each step of electrifying her home. She walked us through upgrading her panel, installing a heat pump water heater, even though it had to be done on an emergency basis, 2-zone heat pump home heater, air filter for wildfire smoke, induction cooktop, and 2 EVs. She praised Bayren for guiding them successfully through the process. It was easy to see why PCE recognized the Goforths last year with a Home Electrification Award. Operations Specialist Shayna Barnes reviewed the principles and process PCE uses when setting electricity rates in its service area. She also explained the impact of the power charge indifference adjustments on rates. Kirsten Andrew Schwinn summarized the results of our annual CAC member satisfaction survey that revealed strong appreciation of professional staff support and some continued concern about meeting stated committee goals and making best use of member skills, interests, and expertise. We'll share more results of and follow-up action on the survey soon. Member Brandon Chan serves on our role of the Citizens Advisory Committee working group with me and others. He shared that our working group recently developed and sent 2 Google surveys to all California community choice aggregators, one for staff liaisons to community advisory groups to complete, and one for staff to forward to advisory group members to fill out. We hope to learn best practices of community advisory groups so we can realize the full potential of our CAC. Finally, we reviewed the protocol for our first in-person meeting in March, which many of us are looking forward to. This completes my report. What questions do you have for me?
Thank you, Cheryl.
You're very welcome.
Let's see if there are any questions. I don't see any hands up at the moment. Is there any public comment on Cheryl's report or any questions? I don't see any. Okay, thank you. We'll move on. The next item on the agenda is the appointment of an ad hoc chair and vice chair nominating committee. And let me give a little bit of perspective on this, particularly for our new members. Each year, Peninsula Clean Energy the board appoints a chair and a vice chair. Those members can serve for up to 3 years in that position. And the way we do that is that we take nominations or we just take volunteers who want to be on the nominating committee. That committee then receives indications from anyone who's interested in applying for the chair or vice chair position. And then that committee makes a recommendation to the board that is voted on at the March meeting. Following the March meeting, the chair and vice chair convene an executive committee that they propose to the board at the April meeting, and the board votes on a new executive committee for the next year. And that committee and the board chair and vice chair then serve until the following year. So the first step here is to take any volunteers that would be willing to serve on this nominating committee. If you can just raise your hand, that would help me. This is not a very time-consuming activity. You basically get the applications from anybody that is interested in serving, and then you make a recommendation. Then you talk to them, and you make a recommendation to the board at the next meeting. Marty, thank you. And I need a couple more members. We can't have just one person. Julia, thank you. And is anybody else willing to?
Jeff Alves is raised.
Jeff Alves. Okay, great. That's good. Thank you, Marty, Julia, Jeff, you're the committee. That's great. And I would encourage anyone on the board who's interested in serving as the chair or vice chair to please send an email to Marty, Julia, and Jeff so that they can get your information. The next item on the agenda is the appointment of an ad hoc Citizens Advisory Committee nominating committee. And I'm not sure we've actually set up a nominating committee for the Citizen Advisory Committee before, but we are doing that this time.
Oh,
Dawn-
we do that every year.
I missed it then. Okay, we have Dave and Donna and somebody else.
Maybe it would be wonderful if maybe one of the new board members who's recently joined. I know it's always hard to volunteer for a committee right away when you first start, but this is a very easy committee and Dave and I have done it before, so it won't be a lot of work. And this would be a wonderful way for you to get to know some of our CAC advisory members. So maybe somebody new would volunteer. Yay!
Pranita.
Pranita, yay!
Yeah, it also, this is the beginning to get to understand and know PCE. So this is very helpful when you start to get to know other members of the board. That really gets you into PCE. Okay, I think we've got a committee, so that's great. And then the last appointment that I'm looking for are, we typically have liaisons from the board to the Citizens Advisory Committee. These are two members of the board who attend as many Citizens Advisory Committee meetings as they can. The Citizens Advisory Committee meets about once a month, sometimes a little less, but approximately once a month. And it's a very impactful committee for PCE. They've been incredibly insightful in terms of helping and PCE understand issues and look at particularly strategic issues. And maybe okay, Colleen, great, thank you. Is there anyone else that wishes to be a liaison to the Citizens Advisory Committee?
I'm happy to do it. I
Okay.
can't see how to raise my hand on the Zoom, but.
Okay, great, Christine. That'd be great.
And Rick, can I ask a question just real quick,
Please.
just on again? But so long as we don't create a quorum, I believe that if you want to pop in as a member of the public, or you ever, if some of the other people can't make it, the appointed people can't make it, if they just let Rick know as chair or me as vice chair, I think we can reach out and make sure that there's one or two people from the committee there. Is that correct? That wouldn't violate the Brown Act, would it?
No, as long as there's not a majority, it's fine.
And I'm just going to say, having attended a number of these meetings, they're incredibly, they really inspire you. The people that are involved are devoted, dedicated sustainability people, and their ideas and comments are imaginative and visionary, and they're really inspirational and just a fantastic group of people to work with. So I highly encourage people to join a meeting or two if they can over the next few months.
Yeah. And it's often that every liaison can't attend. So I'm very comfortable to have 3 liaisons, Harvey. If you want to sign up for that, I think that would be great. And I think that will make it much more likely that we have 2 people at each meeting, which is really helpful to the Citizen Advisory Committee because it connects them with the individual members from the board. So I often just sit in to listen because they're very impactful meetings.
Sounds good.
Okay, thank you, all 3 of you. Thank you very much. And now we're moving on to item number 11, which is a report on the PCE rates that became or that will become effective February 1st. And I'm sure that's Leslie that's giving that report.
Yes, thank you. You can go to the next slide. So just wanted to start off reviewing what we established were our guiding principles for rate making this year. We wanted to continue to have 2 rate schedules for PCE customers. The reason we wanted to do this was to make sure that we could have at minimum 5% discount for all of our customers. We made a bit of a change in how we are assigning rates to customers this year based on some changes and some anomalies that were happening with the PCIA, which is the power charge and difference adjustment. That's the assessment that PG&E has on their side of the bill for customers who take service with a third-party provider. We are assigning 1 rate to all customers from vintage 2016 to 2021. So that's basically everyone in San Mateo County, plus the bulk of our customers in Los Banos. And then we set a separate rate for the vintage 2022 customers. And we did this because of the differences in the PCIA, which I'll show you how that broke out once the rates once the rates were published. You can go to the next slide. So just a quick review. This is how we calculate our rates on a standard basis for our customers. We start with the PG&E bundled generation rate. We multiply that by 95%. And then depending on which rate schedule we're calculating for, we subtract out the appropriate PCIA and franchise fee surcharges. And then whatever's left over is the Peninsula Clean Energy generation rate. That's what we charge on our side of the bill. And we factor in, what PG&E is going to be assessing on their side of the bill so that the customers overall are going to get a net 5% discount from what PG&E would charge them if they were a bundled customer, if they were getting all their electricity services from PG&E. Next slide. So this is what ended up being the PCIA rates for those vintages that we were most concerned about, the 2016 vintage, which is what is a territory vintage for San Mateo County, the 2021 vintage, which is what we enrolled the vast majority of our Los Banos customers at, and then the 2022 vintage, which is what has been assigned to the net metering customers in Los Banos who joined after July 1 of this year, because we had that rolling NEM enrollment for Los Banos to align with the net metering true-ups for those customers. So the numbers changed a bit from what we presented last month, because last month was just a projection from earlier estimates, but the scenarios stayed the same. So we ended up with a small positive 2016 PCIA, a slightly negative 2021 PCIA, and then a larger positive 2022 PCIA for those customers, so in the end, we grouped all of the customers between 2016 and 2021 into one rate group, and then we have a different rate for those 2022 customers because of that higher PCIA. Go to the next slide. And just sort of show you what that it breaks out with our customer wise, customers that have a vintage between 2016 and 2020. 295,000 customers. This is pretty much our enrollment in San Mateo County. We've got the 2021 customers in Los Banos, which is a little over 13,000. And then that small group of the 2022 customers in Los Banos, about 1,600. And then the net discount, because we set the rates based off the 2016 vintage and the 2022 vintage, those groups of customers are getting, you know, a 5% discount. That 2021 group, because there is a negative PCIA, so they're getting a credit back on the PG&E side of the bill instead of a charge. They're actually going to get an overall slightly higher discount when everything nets out. And I'm going to break that down for you in the next slide. So here's the, you know, just an example here using E1, which is that really basic residential rate. We start with if we just start with the generation part of the PG&E rate, so not the transmission distribution side, but the generation part, which is what we use to set our rates at, that ended up being 15, you know, a little over 15.5 cents per kilowatt hour right now. That's where it's set at. We multiply that by 95%, you get 14.8 cents per kilowatt hour, and then we do the rate calculations for our two benchmarks for the 2016 you know, PCIA and the 2022 PCIA. You can see that the net result, the effective customer rate, ends up being the same for 2016 and 2022, because that's was calculating for that 5% discount there, but it ends up being a little bit lower for the 2021 vintage customers, because instead of a charge for PCIA, they're actually getting a little bit of a credit. And so the net impact for them is a little bit more. Ends up for E1 being just under just under 10%. We looked at it across the rate book for all of the rates, and it sort of it fell between 8 and 12% on average, you know, across the rate. Depends on the rate specifically, but that's where it landed. And what does that mean on an average bill in terms of savings? So if we took an average sort of residential bill, about 450 kilowatt hours a month, most customers are going to save $3.51. Those ones that have the negative PCIA with the 2021 vintage, they're going to save a little bit more, about $6.78. So it's a you know, it's a difference, but the total bill that we're looking at here in this scenario, so someone who has about a 450 kilowatt hour usage on a monthly basis, their total electric bill is about $160. So, you know, it's a small savings. It's a little bit more savings for those customers that have the negative PCIA, but everybody's still saving some money, at least 5%. You can go to the next slide. And that's it. So any questions on that?
Okay, so I don't see any hands at the moment. I have a couple questions.
Sure.
One, Leslie, I mean, obviously with the bulk of customers in Los Banos, they're getting a real benefit. Have we, and that's good information to share with them, right?
Yeah.
So I don't know if we've contemplated, you know, what to do with that in terms of marketing or just informing those customers. But I mean, I think that's a great story that they're, depending on which rate they have. And for new members of the board, there are dozens and maybe more than 100 different rates. There are so many rates. It's not just the half a dozen residential rates you may think about. There are many, many, many rates. And we have to, our rates have to apply to all of those different categories. So I think use of the E1 as an example at almost 9.5 cents, that's a really, or 9.5% is a really good story for them. And I hope that we'll let people in Los Banos know, because I think that, you know, the more positive attitude we can have in Los Banos, the better.
Yeah, I don't think we planned a really big announcement or push about that, but definitely going to arm, Sandra in our call center with those talking points, for customers who have questions. And we will be doing an update comparison with PG&E for the joint rate comparison, and we'll use the majority, the 2021 PCIA and the rates for Los Banos to kind of show that. So if people go to look at that rate comparison specifically for Los Banos, it'll come up at that higher discount on the PG when they look for the joint rate comparison.
Okay, great. Any other comments or questions from members of the board? I don't see any. Is there any public comment on this? I don't see any public comment. Okay. Leslie, I'll just say one other thing I think we should probably talk about at some point at the executive committee. Last year, when we reviewed our financials, we said at some point during this year, if things continue as they were projected, which was that we would have a positive cash flow in the tens of millions of dollars, that we should review the discount. And
yeah.
It's not specific to rates, but our discount is a very heavy lever that we've been extremely consistent with. And for those members of the board who are new, we're the only CCA that has maintained anywhere close to this level of discount, which we've had the same 5% discount since we first organized and it was since we first went public with our rates. And given the cash flow this year, and we've seen other CCAs increasing their discount. So there's quite a number of CCAs that have increased the discount this year. And at some point here with the mid-year coming on us, we should have that discussion. Okay, the next.
Yes.
The next item.
Christina and I talked about that a little bit. So I said Christina and I talked about that a little bit. So I think she's maybe running some of those figures in the background.
Great.
And Chair DeGolia, if I may, I think you're also teeing up a hey everybody, those that are interested will be talking about mid-year performance at the Audit and Finance Committee scheduled in February. So this is a good tee up to that discussion.
Great. Okay, great. Thank you, Christina. Okay, the next item on the agenda is approval of amendments to the California Community Power Participation Share Agreement.
Hello, good evening. I'll be presenting this item. My name is Sarah Mata. I'm a Power Resources and Compliance Manager. I'm also acting as the interim director while we complete our search for a permanent director. Next slide, please. So our recommendation is that the board delegate authority to the CEO to execute these amendments. These are for the Project Participation Share Agreements, also known as the PPSAs, with California Community Power and participating CCAs related to 1 long duration storage project and 2 firm clean resources projects. And those, the 3 amendments, 1 for each of the 3 projects are listed here. We have the Tumbleweed long duration storage project, the Fish Lake geothermal project, the ORGP, which is Ormat's LLP geothermal portfolio project. Next slide, please. I see there's a lot of new members tonight, and we did want to take this opportunity to provide a little more background about California Community Power. So I probably have more slides than is really necessary, but I thought it could be a good opportunity to have an educational moment about CC Power, because it is complicated, but we get a lot of benefits from it. So CC Power is a joint powers authority composed of 9 CCAs. Those 9 members are shown on the right here. Really the goal of CC Power is to leverage our buying power, deliver more cost-effective, clean and reliable energy solutions for our customers. And by working together, we can access larger projects and achieve greater economies of scale And we can also, pool our resources and have greater efficiency in managing the projects, the solicitations, and the negotiations. And Peninsula Clean Energy was a founding member. We've been a member since early 2021. Next slide, please. These are the 3 projects that we, Peninsula Clean Energy, have contracted through CC Power. There's a lot of detail here. I don't think it's really necessary for you to know all this for tonight's item, but if you're interested to learn more about the 3 projects we're doing through CC Power, here's some details about them. And as we mentioned before, we have the Tumbleweed Long Duration Storage Project, the Open Mountain Energy Geothermal Project, that's called Fish Lake, and the Ormat Portfolio Geothermal Resources Project. Next slide, please. Okay, at the risk of putting you all to sleep, I did want to summarize the differences between how we typically contract and how we contract through CC Power. So please bear with me here and just think of it as an opportunity to try to absorb some of the more technical side of power resources. So typically, when we contract for a project, we sign a single agreement with the project developer. And that's sort of represented by this green or blue box here. There's one contract between the developer and the CCA. Next slide, please. With CC Power, it gets a little more complicated. There's still that first sort of master agreement that we call the Power Purchase Agreement, the PPA, or the Energy Storage Services Agreement, the ESSA. But now that contract's between the project developer and CC Power. Next slide, please. Then on top of that, we layer in another contract called the Project Participation Share Agreement. This contract is between CC Power and all of the participating CCAs. This is how we link the benefits of the project to our customers. Instead of using one contract, it takes 2. That's because we're going through CC Power.
And just to note for everybody, all of the CCAs that are members of CC Power don't have to participate in each of these purchase agreements. So in this example, you can see Sarah is showing 7 of the 9 CCAs are participating.
That's right. Thanks, Rick. All right, next slide, please. There are a couple more agreements that get added to deal with liability and security questions. So we have another agreement here, the Buyer Liability Pass-Through Agreement. It basically helps guarantee that the developer will be paid, no matter what the defaults and arrangements are that the CCAs are. Next slide, please. And then there's also an operations agreement that defines how the project gets basically scheduled into the ISO wholesale energy market. All right, next slide, please. So now that you're all experts in the CC Power contracting structure, I can say tonight's amendment is about the Project Participation Share Agreement, or the PPSA, and you'll all know what I mean. It's okay if it takes a few times of looking at this for it to make sense. So we're going to talk about a proposed amendment to the Project Participation Share Agreement. All right, next slide, please. Apologies for all the words on this slide, but we did want to talk about all of these topics. So the PPSA in general governs how all the members pay for the project and what share of the project each member gets, hence the share in the title. So this agreement basically says each CCA has so many % of the project. That means you have to pay so much % of the cost of the project, and you get so much % of the revenue from the project. It also helps talk about what happens if one member drops out or defaults on their payments. Those major elements of the PPSA are functioning as intended, and we're not proposing any changes to those major elements. In addition to that, the PPSA also addresses how the projects operate and are administered. And originally, the PPSA required approval at a formal noticed meeting of the project committee, which is composed of staff from all of the participating members, for relatively minor administrative actions, such as project management during the development phase, managing the budget for project management, and determining the scheduling and the bidding of the project. And I'll just say for all of PCE's projects, these are really administerial actions that are handled at the staff level and aren't brought to the board for approval unless something really strange is happening. So the requirement of the project committee's approval for these administrative actions has been limiting the ability of the project to efficiently and timely operate and meet the constraints of the contract. Next slide, please. With that in mind, CC Power has adopted a strategic business plan that makes recommendations regarding the roles and responsibilities of the CC Power Board of Directors, the CC Power General Manager, and project participants. And the strategic business plan helps provide a path forward for how to better operate the projects under the PPSA. So Amendment 1 is really meant to align our PPSAs with the recommendation in the strategic business plan. And it's meant to improve the operational efficiency of the projects. Next slide, please. All right, so here's the things that the amendment specifically does. It removes the project committee. That was a committee that was made up of all of the members of the participating CCAs. Sorry, one member from each of the participating CCAs. And assigns those responsibilities to the CC Power General Manager. The General Manager can still form project committees to coordinate amongst the members on an as-needed basis. The amendment further defines the roles and responsibilities of the General Manager and the CC Power Board of Directors, consistent with the CC Power Strategic Business Plan. Amendment 1 greatly improves the efficiency of CC Power's ability to manage projects in development and schedule the projects in the CAISO market once they are online. There is no financial impact of Amendment 1, and staff support Amendment 1. Next slide, please. We always do an environmental and labor review for any contracts and amendments that come through. So we want to note that the environmental and labor requirements are negotiated prior to the execution of the main contract, the ESSA or the PPA. And Amendment 1 only affects administration of those contracts after the main ESSA and PPA contracts have been executed. So, and Amendment 1 doesn't affect our ability to enforce any of those environmental and labor terms of the contract. Peninsula Clean Energy retains the ability to negotiate for environmental and labor terms consistent with our policies. And any future projects that might be considered by CC Power will be brought to Peninsula Clean Energy's board for review and approval prior to execution. Next slide, please. The Amendment 1 was approved by CC Power's board on December 14th, 2022. All the participating members are targeting board approval from their respective boards in January through March of this year. And you can see on the right here the members who are affected by the PPSA amendments. As Rick noted, not all members are participating in these projects, and when they are targeting to seek board approval for the amendment. And as you may have noted, there's no financial impact, and our policy 15 does allow the CEO to delegate authority, the CEO to execute amendments to existing contracts. However, we wanted to bring this to the board for the sake of transparency and to make everyone aware of what's happening at CC Power. And again, staff does support this amendment.
Yeah, just to add, you can see there's a couple CCAs that didn't feel it was necessary to bring this technical of an amendment to the board, but others did. And when the executive committee discussed it, we thought the better judgment was to bring it before the board, both because we generally have brought such things to the board, but also it's an educational opportunity for the new members to understand those contracts that go through CC Power, which is a very important organizational mechanism that we helped create and that we're benefiting from in the relatively complex way that Sarah described. And while most of us on this board don't understand all the technical issues behind this, One thing we do understand is the Brown Act. And as I understood it, what the project committee, which is being removed, and that authority is being given to the executive manager of CC Power, that committee was governed by the Brown Act. So this takes a difficult organizational mechanism, the project committee, and gets rid of it and makes it more efficient, essentially.
Exactly. Thank you, Rick. So I think my next slide is just a repeat of staff's recommendation. I'm open to answer any questions if you have any for me.
Great. Are there any questions from anybody on the board? And please, I just want to be very clear with all of our new members. As we go through different issues, you're gonna come across some technical stuff like this. Some are more deeply rooted in the nuances of our power purchase agreements. We have a very substantial business here. Don't hesitate to ask questions. And even if the questions end up going to better understanding PCE and our business than just the technical particular point in front of us, they're fully valid and we will respond to them. But I don't see any questions. Let me see if there's any public comment on this. I don't see any public comment. Can I get a motion to approve the amendment?
So move, Alves.
Second, Romero.
Thank you, and thank you.
San Mateo County,
Yes.
San Mateo County, Atherton,
Yes.
Belmont,
Yes.
Brisbane,
Yes.
Burlingame,
Yes.
Colma, Daly City,
Yes.
East Palo Alto,
Yes.
Foster City,
Yes.
Half Moon Bay,
Yes.
Hillsborough,
Yes.
Los Banos, Menlo Park,
Yes.
Millbrae, Pacifica,
Yes.
Portola Valley,
Yes.
Redwood City,
Yes.
San Bruno,
Yes.
San Carlos,
Yes.
San Mateo,
Yes.
South San Francisco, and Woodside. The motion passes. Thank you.
Okay, great. So the next item on the agenda is approval of the 2023 policy platform.
Oh,
Oh, do we
actually,
have we have 3 amendments. Is that right, Sarah?
well, actually, this is an information only related to item 21, and we thought it might make sense to provide this update now, since the CC
Makes
powered
sense.
concepts are fresh in everyone's mind.
Good.
All right, so this is additional context on item 21 on the agenda, and Jan also mentioned this in her CEO report. One of our projects through CC Power, the Tumbleweed long duration storage project, has been expanded, and we wanted to provide some more background on that. Next slide, please. All right, so some history of this project. CC Power, well, I guess it was the members who would soon form CC Power, issued an RFO for long duration storage resources in October of 2020. The Tumbleweed storage project, which is being developed by a company called LS Power, was shortlisted in June of 2021. Contract negotiations took place through the end of 2021. The Peninsula Clean Energy Board approved our participation in the project at a special meeting in January 2022, about a year ago now. And all the members provided their approval, and the contracts were fully executed in April of 2022. The original project had a total capacity of 69 megawatts, and it's an 8-hour duration battery. So if you take 69 times 8 hours, you get 552 megawatt hours, which tells you the total energy the battery could store. Peninsula Clean Energy's share is just over 19%, which works out to 13.6 megawatts, or a little over 100 megawatt hours. Next slide, please. Last year, the developer, LS Power, approached CC Power and offered to expand the total project capacity to 75 megawatts and 600 megawatt hours. All of the project participants support the expansion of the project. So our share will remain the same, and we will receive the same pricing and contract terms for the expanded capacity. This is a great project for us. It not only helps us meet our 24/7 goal, it also meets some procurement requirements that we are mandated by the CPUC to procure. And you can see the table at the bottom shows some summary of the project originally and the expanded portion. You can see PCE's share has now expanded to about 14.8 megawatts, or a total of 118 megawatt hours of total energy storage capacity. Next slide, please. I can show you guys this because you're not all experts on the CC Power contract structure. I'm sort of joking, but next slide, please. This expansion for Tumbleweed applies to the Energy Storage Services Agreement. And as you can see here, this agreement is between the developer and CC Power. So PCE is not a signatory to this agreement. So, you know, there's nowhere for us to sign on the line for this amendment. But we did want to share this update with you and let you know that this is happening, and we're really excited about this. Next slide, please. So the CC Power board voted to approve the amended Energy Storage Service Agreement in December of 2022. And as I mentioned before, Peninsula Clean Energy does not need to execute the agreement. There are no changes to the other contracts which we are signatories to, the PPSA or the Buyer Liability Pass-Through Agreement. And we're not a signatory to the ESSA. And as Jan mentioned, when the board originally approved this project in January 2022, they approved a not to exceed amount of $100 million for the project. And this expanded capacity will fall within the not to exceed amount, even if some contingencies in the project, in the contract go through where we cover other participants' participation if they decide not to participate towards the end. And no action is required by the board at this time, but we did want to provide this informational update. And that's all I have to share. If there are any questions, I'm happy to try to answer them.
Jeff.
Thanks. I apologize if I've asked this before, but does the expansion here, does it reflect any kind of loosening or improvement in the overall market in terms of supply chain or pricing of batteries, or is it some other reason that's driving them to expand?
I'm not sure. I think it might have been related to how much RA they qualified for. I think they found out that they qualified for slightly more RA than they originally thought they would. I'm not 100% sure on that, but I kind of remember that as the original reason.
So the overall kind of market for this stuff isn't sort of getting any better, or?
Not that we've seen. However, our RFO closes next week, and we will be seeing a lot of offers at that time, we hope. So that'll be
I'm grasping at straws here. So, thank you.
Yeah, just so new members understand that comment, PCE issued an RFO, which is in the market, and we're getting responses next week, I think.
That's right.
And was that it, or was there another amendment that you needed to inform us about, Sarah?
That's all the amendments for now.
Okay, great. Okay, so we will move on. The next item is the approval of the 2023 policy platform.
Thank you, Chair DeGolia, and good evening, directors. Mark Hirschman, Director of Government Affairs, with our annual Policy One update. As you may have noticed now, there are two components to Peninsula Clean Energy's policy number one. The first concerns authority delegated to the CEO to timely engage and position Peninsula Clean Energy on public policy matters, including legislative and regulatory issues. And that was updated as part of item 3 this evening. The second part of policy 1, which is before you at this time, provides direction to the organization, staff, and board on legislative, regulatory, and other policy matters. It's in your packet under item 13. There you will find a red line version of the proposed policy and a clean version of the recommended 2023 platform. The red line highlights changes from our 2022 platform, and as you can see, there are 8 different sections to the policy. The updated platform incorporates comments and suggestions from staff, as well as a review by the board's ad hoc legislative committee earlier this month. And so before you is a request for consideration and approval of Peninsula Clean Energy's legislative and regulatory policy platform for 2023. And I'm happy to answer any questions that you may have.
I don't see any questions. Is there any public comment on this? I don't see any public comment. Christine.
Hi, sorry, I was just looking under I'm sorry, just looking at my note here. Under section 6 for community resilience. And I'm new, so tell me if this is not appropriate, but it would just be nice to be able to add something to support policies to underground transmission lines to improve resiliency from fire, wind, and seismic events. I know that's really PG&E more than PCE, so I'm not sure if that's appropriate.
No, that's absolutely fine, Christine. Mark?
If that's the interest of the board, certainly. We, you know, the issue with undergrounding is that to the extent that it being done, it's being done with ratepayer funds. But if we're looking for, if Director Bowles is looking for funding from the state budget for undergrounding, or is this a different, or you're looking for us to encourage PG&E to do that?
Yeah, just looking for encouragement and whatever funding we can find.
So part of the controversy about undergrounding is where that undergrounding would take place and what areas are prioritized and the high cost of undergrounding. There has been some discussion in various circles about the areas, how PG&E is spending the undergrounding money, and as opposed to doing other things that would mitigate wildfires, for instance, and whether the funding is appropriate. So it may behoove us to perhaps be more specific as to what it is we're looking for in undergrounding, or whether we're looking in general at creating a certain amount of resilience, and if so, where that would want to be focused. Undergrounding is an incredibly expensive effort, and so it does draw resources away from other areas. So I've encouraged the board to consider the costs and exactly where we'd be directing those funds be spent. And Leslie, I see you have your hand up.
Yeah, I just wanted to jump in, Mark, and maybe just share, you know, for the board's knowledge that the PG&E has a quarterly sort of resilience meeting that they have with their what they call their you know, safety partners, and so that public agencies are invited to that. I actually listened to that and participate in that on a quarterly basis. and it's updates about the PSPS events and the mitigations they have going on in planning for wildfire safety and outage resiliency. So, you know, if anyone wants some more details on that, you know, we can share that out. I actually potentially think board members can maybe join that call to get the updates from PG&E. I can get clarification on that if there's someone who wants specifically wants to maybe join that call. It's a quarterly meeting on a Friday morning, just to know what PG&E is doing. It's a regional meeting, so they have one for our area, relative our area, our region that we're participating in.
And I see Director Colson has her hand up.
Thank you, Mark. So this is an issue that we've been working on as we renovate El Camino Real and need underground utilities. And I'm almost wondering if we couldn't just tuck it in under community resilience as just a bullet point so that we keep it on our radar. And where it may come up are things like, it could be funding. There were some rules around PG&E rebates and a variety of different things that get a little confusing and detail oriented. But I think maybe just putting a bullet, you know, not on here, but just keeping a little placeholder under community resilience and knowing that that's of interest to our communities so that if anything does come up on the agenda, we can at least write an advocacy and support letter around that. I think that would probably, you know, possibly, I think it was director who said that. I can't really see everybody's name. My colleague who suggested that would satisfy the request.
That sounds great. Thank you.
So Director Colson, if I understand correctly, we do have in, as you point out correctly, in item 6A, we do have as part of our advocacy, increase community resilience to wildfires, and
yes,
rather than amending the platform, we'll star that issue, and as we see legislation or other efforts come through the PUC or Sacramento or otherwise, we would make note of that and bring that to the board for consideration of support.
I think that would be a reasonable way to conduct that that advocacy. And it sounds like the proposer is willing to agree to that. And if that's the case, then I would make a motion. If we want a motion here, do we want a motion on this, Mark, to approve this?
To approve the platform, yes, please.
Yeah, then unless there are other hands, Chair DeGolia, I would make a motion to go ahead and approve the policy platform.
Okay, yeah, sorry.
We might have to take public comment, I think.
Yeah, I want to, you know, this just got distributed to the board in the altered board package, and I haven't seen the recommended changes before. Maybe they came and I missed them. I'm not sure, but I was just looking at them. So I've been a little distracted and I've got a couple questions on them. But let's see if there is any public comment first. And if there is, we will take that. Okay, I don't see any public comment. So let me just ask a couple questions, Mark. You know, it's very hard when a substantial policy comes out 2 days before the meeting, and maybe this had been distributed before and for some reason didn't get fully focused on, but there's a couple things that are removed from the, or that are proposed to be removed from the platform that may be moved to somewhere else because I haven't had an opportunity to review it. But one is item 2F under decarbonation removes support state funding for electric vehicle infrastructure grant programs and for CCA participation in said programs. And it removes support policy efforts to incentivize and deliver carbon-free and renewable energy on 24/7 basis. Given that that's such a strong tenet of PCE, I assume it's been moved somewhere, but I have questions about both of those. And the third one I have a question about is under item 7F. It's proposed to delete support policies that increase development of community local energy resources and DERs, driving local energy resilience, and allow these resources to directly compete with grid infrastructure projects. That's a big issue. I mean, that's obviously a very controversial issue, and in 8D, there's also a deletion of the reference to DERs. So maybe you could comment on those things.
Sure. With respect to 2F on decarbonization, the state funding for electrical vehicle infrastructure and grant programs and CCA participation, that was the CCA advocated bill AB 1814 last year, which was introduced but failed to get a hearing in the assembly, and so it's no longer a CCA effort in the year ahead, and we believe that it is without the CCA language. It's represented by paragraph 2C, which advocates for support of those similar policies, but without the reference to the CCA participation specifically, which reflected the bill. With respect to G, we found that to be redundant with number 4D, item 4D, which states supporting policies that value resource adequacy. I'm sorry, 4D, which formerly 4D, now 4C, support policies that advance and accelerate delivery of carbon-free and renewable energy on a 24/7 basis. And with respect to 7,
Wait, I'm looking at 4C. That I must be looking at the wrong thing. That my copy
now
says 4C is support reform. Oh no, that's B. So I see. Okay, I got you.
So we found it to be redundant, and but highlights our interest in 24/7 energy. And I believe the third one you raised was Chair DeGolia, was item 7E.
That's 7. So well,
7, formerly 7E.
Okay.
In the red line version, and we found that redundant with a number of areas, but in particular 6D, which is supporting policies and increasing community development of community level resources. I believe that was added by the board in part last year, if I'm not mistaken.
Okay.
So we found them to be redundant, and that's why we took them out. And was there anything else?
No, that's fine.
Okay. So I believe we have a public comment. I see.
Yeah, we have a public comment. Is there any other, just let me make sure there's no further questions from members of the board. Okay, no problem. I'll take the public comment. Mark, go ahead.
Thank you. Sorry for the noise from the computer. If it's redundant,
I believe he's muted.
We can't hear you, Mark.
I'm not muted. Are you muting me?
Yeah, we can't hear you.
Can you hear me now?
It sounds like a technical problem.
Or maybe your headphones are plugged in or something. We hear you, but it's really soft.
Oh, let me check. Text. I'll put it in chat.
Okay, why don't you put it in chat? Okay, is there any other public comment? I don't see any other public comment. We have
Chair DeGolia, you're muted.
Yeah, right. Thank you. Okay, I don't see any other public comment. We have a motion. I'm not sure we got a second to the motion.
I'll second it.
Okay, thank you, Rod. Can we do a roll call, please?
San Mateo County,
Yes.
San Mateo County, Atherton,
Yes.
Belmont,
Yes.
Brisbane,
Yes.
Burlingame,
Yes.
Colma, Daly City,
Yes.
East Palo Alto,
Yes.
Foster City,
Yes.
Half Moon Bay,
Yes.
Hillsborough,
Yes.
Los Banos, Menlo Park,
Yes.
Millbrae, Pacifica,
Yes.
Portola Valley,
Yes.
Redwood City,
Yes.
San Bruno,
Yes.
San Carlos,
Yes.
San Mateo,
Yes.
South San Francisco, and Woodside. The motion passes. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Nellie. The next item on the agenda is item 14, which is approval for the solar storage for public buildings contracts.
Hi, good evening, everyone. I'm Dave Freibush. I've been leading the development of this portfolio of projects and this program. It's exciting. This has been in the works for 2.5 years now, and we're on the cusp of actually building some things and getting these projects out there. So we're excited to get to this point. Next slide, please. So the request to you tonight is to delegate authority to the CEO to execute 2 contracts. So there's an engineering, procurement, and construction, or EPC contract, and that is for building the solar and storage systems. And then as well to delegate authority for the CEO to execute a power purchase agreement, and that would be with each of the public agencies that will be where we'll be deploying the solar and storage systems. And it's just I'll get into detail on exactly how these work together, but just it's a package deal. These contracts work together. Next slide, please. So just a brief review of the program. So we're looking to accelerate our DERs and renewable deployments at local government facilities. So we have our goal of 20 megawatts of distributed local storage and solar. This would go towards that. We want to reduce customer energy costs as well as insulate against rising PG&E rates. We want to help our local partners achieve their sustainability goals and develop a reproducible program and a new service model. And we're already working on the next portfolio of projects. So we're well underway on that. Next slide, please. So I'll talk a little bit about the program detail, the portfolio and how we've structured and the policy. So next slide. So this is our current portfolio. It's approximately 2 megawatts of solar and about 200 kilowatts of battery projects currently. There were 15 sites until recently. San Mateo, unfortunately, had to pull out, the city of San Mateo, their police building due to some issues they recently identified with their roof that would have made putting solar on problematic. The rest of the portfolio is here, as you can see. The sites that are the status of go have given us very clear written signaling that they are ready to execute a PPA with us. We have gone extensively worked with all the cities. We issued them the first turn of the PPA, the power purchase agreement, back in August. We got comments from all 13 jurisdictions. We really worked extremely hard to incorporate all the comments from all the jurisdictions to be very clear with everybody about when we went back with the turn of the document, where the change came from, who requested it, whether we made it, and we really worked hard to accommodate as many changes as we could. And so we are still waiting on decisions from the 3 cities here, Belmont, Redwood City, and San Bruno. We're certainly hoping that they will move forward and let us know soon. There's a lot of benefits to these projects. The San Bruno project would save the residents over $2 million over the life of the project, and the Redwood City and Belmont projects we would expect to save about $750,000 over the life of the project. So, they have substantial benefits, and we're excited to move them forward. Next slide, please. So overall, there's a 20-year contract on the PPA, and we would expect about $12 million in savings. And then after that 20-year period, the customers would have an option to buy the systems at the fair market value at that point, which should be quite low. We expect it to be almost a nominal cost. It has to be at an appraised market value. And then at that point, the systems would expect to keep generate for at least 5, maybe 10 more years, and they would then receive all the savings. So it really ends up that the 5 years after the 20 years really actually doubles the savings. So the 12 million is really a low projection, but that would be over the course of their PPA contract with us. And there's no upfront cost to the customers. So they're getting the savings for just allowing these systems to be deployed. And we would manage the procurement, which we're well underway on. We're managing the financing, obtaining the federal tax credits, the installation, and then the operations and maintenance. Next slide, please. So the contract structure, again, I mentioned these contracts work in together. So on one side here, we would execute the contract with the EPC contractor that would install the systems and then operate and maintain them. And then we would be the owner. And then we would have these PPA contracts with each jurisdiction. And the PPA contracts are at the facility level because each facility has a different configuration and a slightly different PPA rate for each facility. So so that's how the contracts are structured. And then if we go to the next slide, as far as the cash flows go, so we're in the middle of this all. So starting on the right, each PPA, the solar generates electricity. It's paid at the cities will pay that at the agreed PPA rate. That's income for Peninsula Clean Energy that we then use to pay off the equipment and associated costs with operating them. And then we've effectively structured this so we're neutral. We're not making money, and there is the only real difference in so these numbers basically add up. The numbers on the right equal the number on the left. The difference is time. The number on the left gets paid once the systems are installed or in milestone based through the installation of the system. So those are, there's an upfront cost that then gets paid periodically over the 20-year term. And the result is a cash neutral. And so that's why the contracts do work together. Next slide, please. So some, things that have happened along the way, as I'm sure we're all aware, there was the Inflation Reduction Act. That had 2 substantial benefits to this portfolio and to this program. One is that it increases the ITC, the investment tax credit. It went up to 30%. It was 26%, and it had been slated to step down to 22%. So a higher investment tax credit. The second piece, which is frankly more important, is it allows for direct pay. So previously, we would have needed to have partnered because we're a tax exempt entity. Under the previous investment tax credit, we would have needed to partner with a tax equity partner that would have effectively been able to capture the tax credit and then share a portion of it. But of course, they would take a portion of it for themselves for their troubles, and that would reduce that effectively mean we'd have to charge a higher PPA rate because we're not able to save as much money. The direct pay provision came out. We spent a lot of time and working with a federal tax council that specializes in this area to do due diligence to make sure that we would qualify for direct pay. And then we made the determination that, yeah, we can capture that tax credit directly. and therefore do not need to do this tax equity partner, which means we can effectively save more money, which we can then pass along to our customers via a lower PPA rate. So it's been a huge benefit for us, and also a lot of work to get to this point that we're have the confidence and done all the modeling to make it all work. But the end result is very positive. Next slide, please. The other important thing out in the ether is, as I'm sure we're also aware, is the change in the net energy metering, the NEM tariff. So the decision was actually released finally. It's no longer a proposed decision, it's the decision to change the net energy metering tariff, and that effectively reduces the value of exported solar energy, which would basically mean you'd have to put on smaller size systems, or you would have to have storage to minimize the amount of energy you're exporting when your building's not using all that solar energy. So we had really wanted to make sure we get these systems installed under the previous NEM tariff, the NEM 2 tariff. And to do that, we submitted interconnection applications for all the sites in the portfolio to PG&E in October. The current ruling has that if you have submitted your interconnection applications prior to, I believe it's April 15th or thereabouts of this year, you qualify. So we are, ahead of the game and having already submitted these applications for these sites to secure their positioning under NEM 2. Next slide. I'll talk about the contracts in more detail now. Next slide. So some more details on the actual EPC contract. So we ran a competitive solicitation over the summer. We selected Intermountain Electric Company. They are a local company. They are headquartered in San Carlos in our territory, and they're also a union shop. So those are two things that we're really excited about. They also have great references from other projects they've done. They've done a lot of city or municipal type projects. And also, of course, on price and the terms and their experience, et cetera. So, we're excited to move forward with them and think they're a great fit for this program. And again, the scope of their role is to procure the equipment, to install it, commission it, and then to maintain it over the course of the term. As well as provide warranty service if necessary. Next slide. So the key details are that the solar pricing, so that enables us to provide even with the with union labor, and we're still able to provide a really substantial savings to customers. The battery pricing came in higher than expected, and we expect that will mean that we'll have to iterate some more with our customers on the system sizing. We're effectively moving the battery projects forward, but on a parallel path. Another key part of the investment or the Inflation Reduction Act is it effectively allows us to capture an ITC on the batteries that don't have to be coupled with the solar. So we're able to move these forward separately. And frankly, in all frankness, it's been complicated enough just getting all the contracts sorted out on solar. So we're just trying to get one piece moving, but we are moving forward with battery and expect to be engaging with the 4 sites that have storage on that as soon as we get the solar projects moving forward. We would own and operate the resources. It's a milestone-based contract. So the payments are made as the EPC contractor achieves milestones on a per site basis through their commercial operation. The modules are warranted for 25 years, the inverters for 15 years, and 1 year for workmanship labor. This includes an O&M contract as well as a minimum solar production guarantee that we then effectively pass through to the customers. Next slide. On the PPA side, we have one contract that we are executing with all cities. There are a couple facility-specific differences on some of the contracts, but the general terms and conditions are the same for all of them. This was created from the Solar Energy Industry Association's template PPA contract that's been recognized as fair to both parties and was adapted for this particular program. As I mentioned before, we've worked incredibly hard to incorporate comments from everyone, and ask you to appreciate the complexity of getting 13 city attorneys to all agree on one contract. So it's certainly been an effort, but I think we've reached something that is really fair and works for everybody. The key terms are tied to the EPC. We call it back-to-back. So for instance, like the performance guarantee and other types of guarantees and warranties, we're effectively pass through and match these two contracts together. And I've already mentioned that about batteries. So I think we can move on to the next slide. Some key details on the actual contract terms. So we had aspired to and are very happy to actually deliver on a 0% escalation. It's very rare, if not unheard of, to see this on commercial solar projects, that there's no escalation in price over the term, and that's something that Jan was very clear about, that we wanted 0% escalation. We're able to make it work. So we're excited about that. That offers the certainty of a guaranteed price. Meanwhile, utility PG&E rates are going up 5% a year. So that's huge. And as time goes on, the difference between a PPA rate that's not escalating with utility rates that are means that there's massive savings on the back half of these contracts. So the pricing delivers near 20% or better. The savings is a function of the type of installation we're doing. So the PPA rates themselves, we structured it so that the only difference in a PPA rate between one facility or another is a function of whether they're rooftop, carport, more of one or the other, because the carports are more expensive than the rooftop. So there's a premium for carport, and we've basically done a weighted average. So if you're only a rooftop system, you have the lowest rate. If you're only carport, you effectively have the highest rate. And if you're somewhere in between, you have a weighted average of the amount of kilowatts of rooftop versus carport. But we're still, the difference between those two is still just about 3 cents a kilowatt hour. So we were, I think, able to develop something that's really fair and and even makes the carport systems quite attractive. And our projections are based on PG&E rates increasing at 5% a year. I think they're on record saying they expect that at least through 2026. And certainly we've seen higher increases than that recently. So it's actually I think a fairly reasonable estimation. Again, it's a 20-year term. There's an option. I mentioned at the end of the 20-year term, the customers could buy the systems. We also have put into the contract the possibility that we could do a PPA term extension at that point if they, for whatever reason, don't want to buy it, and that would be mutual agreement negotiated at some point in the future. Mentioned the performance guarantee. That's for a minimum solar production, and that's based off of there's an estimate that's done of how much solar we would expect the system to produce, and we are guaranteeing that. We're guaranteeing 90% of that is gonna happen, and we would provide the operations and maintenance. So the customers really don't have to do anything except allow the systems to be installed. Next slide. As far as what's included in the pricing, so I mentioned that the main difference is the difference in the PPA price ends up being the difference in the actual cost of the equipment. That's of course the bulk of the cost is the equipment. So it includes the EPC costs. It includes the system design costs for determining what we're going to be putting on there. We have a contingency, insurance, permitting, and interconnection. We have included a system removal cost. So if the customer at the end declines to, if they purchase the system, then there's a system removal cost that presumably we would not need to eventually charge them. We do really need to have that in our financials at this point, though, because the investment tax laws, the investment tax credit laws are very clear that we can't pre-negotiate a sale in the future of this system. So, so by having that system removal cost in there, we are indicating that, look, we have budgeted that we can pull that system out at the end of 20 years if for whatever reason, either the customer doesn't want to buy it or we can't agree to an extension in terms, like that's been budgeted in. So it does not look like we've pre-negotiated a sale. It includes the operation and maintenance as well as reserves for equipment. And I mentioned that the modules are warranted for 25 years, the inverters for 15 years. It's possible an inverter is going to fail within the first 20 years. So we have some reserves in there for should that happen. And a very small direct expense, 1/8 of a full-time equivalent employee for dealing with things as they come up. So, it's honestly a fairly trivial cost that we're putting in there that goes into the PPA price. We are not including cost of capital. We are not including all the program pilot development costs, including legal, and we are not including overhead. So as we've communicated to all the participating agencies to date, we are not looking to make a profit. We are not trying to make a profit. Our goal is to break even and offer the most the most compelling financial deal that can be offered and that anybody is going to offer. I think I've talked about the bullets at the bottom, so let's move on to the next slide. Okay, next steps. Next slide is the next step. Okay, so as far as the fiscal impact, the EPC contract is not to exceed 10 million. That does include the battery costs. 30% of that would be received back via the ITC. The PPA agreements would be receiving ongoing revenues over the 20 years. And so again, it's net neutral. And the main issue is when the money goes out versus when it comes in. In 2022, 2023, beginning of 2024, will be the outflow, that $10 million or some, so that's the max, would be spent. And then over the next, and then the ITC would be received likely within a year or two of that. So so that would be a cash inflow in 2023 or 2024, possibly 2025, I suppose, but likely 2024. Then the receipt of the PPA revenues over the next 20 years. And then 2043 is the year when the cash inflows have equaled our cash outflow. Next slide. As far as the timeline goes, I mentioned we've already submitted the interconnection applications to secure the NEM 2 grandfathering position. We are hoping to get these executed in January. That should be January 2023. Apologies for that. January to May 2023 would be the EPC contractor has to do its own walk down and design diligence. There likely will be some changes that here and there that come up. There's a whole process within the contracts for managing that. And so we, again, would be iterating with the customers in a parallel path on the batteries. And if forward, we would basically have an addendum to the PPA agreement as well as an addendum to the EPC agreement for the scope of those projects. But again, I mentioned that the cost of them is included in that $10 million authorization. We expect that the completion of the final design packages and receipt of all permits would be happening May 2023. Frankly, this was probably might be a little optimistic because we've gotten pushed a month or two since when I first put this together. So it might be June or July, but sometime around then would be completion of that. And then concurrent with that, the equipment of this procurement, construction starts, and then target completion would be, I'd expect that we'd be able to complete some sites by the end of this year and all sites in the first quarter of 2024. With the caveat that there is always the potential for delays on the interconnection of these systems through PG&E's interconnection process. I think it's always a black box. It's always very frustrating and hard to really plan around. I'm concerned with we're not the only people that are rushing to get stuff in before the change in the NEM tariff. So it's not going to get any better. And, I won't be surprised if there are some issues, but what can we do other than move forward and do our best? Next slide. So again, the key next steps are to execute the EPC contract and to execute the power purchase agreement with each city that wishes to move forward. I think there's one more slide that effectively says the next thing. Yes. So we are recommending that the board delegates the authority to the chief executive officer to execute the EPC contract with Intermountain Electric in an amount not to exceed $10 million for the deployment of the solar and storage system, and to execute the power purchase agreements with the participating jurisdictions for a term of 20 years to sell the energy generated by these systems, with the revenues expected to fully offset the cost of the EPC contract over the PPA term. I believe that is the last slide.
Great. Thank you, Dave. Very thorough presentation. Questions from members of the board? This is obviously an important contract that lots of our cities are participating in, and that many of you have probably had this presented at your city councils for your city, because it's been through all of the cities that Dave has mentioned. But if there's any questions at the PCE level, now's the time to ask them. Carlos.
Yeah, thanks. I'll start this off. So first of all, I know most of the time I think staff is able to post these presentations before the actual meeting, so I can split my screen and look at your presentation and do it question. So perhaps Jan, I looked online and I didn't see this presentation posted, but perhaps in the future, if they could just get posted at the time that we start the meetings, then at least, we can split screen and ask questions. But so could we go back several slides, please? And let's go back to the slide where where you talked about cost of capital not included. I did not take down that number, so sorry. And perhaps it's posted and I just wasn't able to find it, so forgive me if I'm in error.
I think all right, so I think Shane is running slides. I think it's slide 16, perhaps, is what.
Is that right? Okay, well, let me just, I'll try to remember these from memory here. So on the cost of capital issue, we are essentially using our kind of program funds that we've set aside for this program, correct? I mean, we're not going to the capital markets. We're not getting any, lent funds. There's an opportunity cost loss, but we're basically using our own capital. Is that correct?
Correct.
Okay. All right. So, I mean, let's not dwell on the time value of money issue, but I mean, there are. So how do we, when we calculate the PPA price for folks, it sounds like you internally have some annual escalator that somehow it's obviously it's a upfront cost price, but when we calculate that, you're only assuming operation maintenance and cost to repay, correct? But there's no, what you call profit, there's no profit imputed into the calculation, correct?
Yeah, I mean, effectively, we've accounted for all the costs that we would expect to be incurred through the procurement operations, et cetera, including contingencies and reserves over the course of the project. But the end result is an IRR of 0, right? I mean, over the 20 years. So there's no, and we're not adding that any type of other compensating aspect like a cost of capital somewhere else in the calculation. So yeah.
But is there a reason we would not have put some sort of PC overhead, some sort of load onto this? I see that there's a 1/8 FTE in this, but I mean, certainly it would seem legitimate to have included a PCE overhead number. But is there a reason that that was excluded?
I think I should probably defer to
maybe I
Rafael or
can jump
Gina on
in.
this. Yeah.
Happy Director Romero to respond here. Our intention here is to maximize the benefit to the local agencies, and recognizing that this is effectively a pilot round, a novel structure. We have gone the extra mile, if you will, to make sure that those benefits are delivered in this first round. Once we have full confidence of the structure and head into subsequent rounds, I think some of these questions will come back, and we will be evaluating this on an ongoing basis about what additional costs might be most appropriate to incorporate. But the intention here, and PCE overhead would be a pretty nominal number here, and so we were really aiming to maximize the benefits. So they are program costs, in effect, ongoing. There's some overhead here, and those are really program costs.
So on your included costs, you have a contingency, and I assume that contingency is a construction contingency. Is that what that is?
Yeah.
Is that correct? And I'm curious, what is that? Do you have a percentage at this point? I mean, we've never done one of these projects before. Can you tell me what that number is?
I can. You have to give me a minute to
Okay. So as you're looking that up, when you first started this presentation, I was thinking about operation and maintenance, kind of replacement reserves, given that some things are going to be out of warranty and they're going to have to get replaced. What rule of thumb are you using? What industry standard are you using to try to figure out what the appropriate reserves are that you're going to be on an annual basis, trying to collect to make sure that we don't wind up spending?
Sure. To your first question on the contingency, it was 2.5% of the portfolio. So basically 2.5% of the EPC costs was the contingency. So we did, we utilized a consultant that has extensive experience in modeling solar projects, and we started from a model that he had developed, that's sort of like a standard PPA model, and then adapted it for this. So all of these assumptions, the contingency, how much to allot for this, were vetted. And through that relationship, there's another consultant we had on it, as well as we ran our numbers by McCalmont Engineering, which is the design firm that's been under contract for us to do the design. So we kind of triangulated, through a few sources to make sure to do gut check on all these numbers, and they, are under, our belief is that they, accurately reflect, common industry assumptions.
And so, Dave, in terms of a 2.5% contingency, is that for the industry a number that kind of reigns on projects of this nature? I mean, it seems awful low to me, but I'm looking at it from a kind of a larger construction, whether it's commercial and or primarily residential, multifamily, but yeah.
It actually was lower originally, and I actually advocated for us increasing that a little bit. I think part of it is, we're not building a building here. I mean, we're putting solar on rooftops and carports. They're still relatively simple projects. So I think just like the margin of the margin of error is not as large, and I think that is kind of what's behind it. Like we're just ultimately, as complicated as it's been to move this whole everything forward, it's more complicated on the contracting side. The actual deployment of the equipment is not really all that complicated.
Yeah, I would just say when I'm out of ground, that is when I'm if I'm doing a project or consulting on a project that is out of ground, my contingency kind of jumps to 8 to 10%, falls from 15 to maybe 10.
Right.
It just 2.5 seems like it's pretty low, but if you all,
Well,
I'm glad you
Yeah.
agreed to push it up.
Well, all right. So this is actually an important part. So the way the process works is we have a bid from the EPC contractor for a price for, let's say, a given site, right? So it's X dollars to build this, and they have effectively committed to that they will build this for that price. The contingency is really if there's a change in design that's needed. They go out there, they find out, there's this thing we didn't know about. It's going to cost this much more. At that point, we have the option to, if it turns out that needs to be done, there are gates, exit ramps in the contract for us to say, you know what, we can't absorb that cost and we're not going to move forward with that particular project. So that really is the risk management here, like that we wouldn't be on the hook for 10% more because we can effectively say, you know what, we didn't budget for that. Of course, at that point, we could potentially renegotiate a PPA price with the city and say, look, we didn't know about this. We have to raise the price and do it at that point. The contingency is really there, frankly, to give us a little extra cushion that if it turns out there's a small increase in price, there's something that's different from what was expected in the design, but it's not a major increase, that we could actually absorb that within our expected costs and still offer that PPA price and not lose money on it. So the contingency normally a contingency is I need this here because I am on the hook for delivering this thing, and if I don't, I'm out, and I want to make sure there's not an off ramp. But in the way we've structured this, there is an exit ramp for us to say, you know what, that came in, that's too expensive, and we're just not going to move forward.
And the contractor mentioned earlier is on a fixed fee not to exceed basis, correct? And they have already looked at these sites. Is that
Yeah, they have looked at them. I mean, they need to not, they haven't had a contract in place, so they need to then go do a really detailed look, show up on the site and walk it and make sure. And essentially, the contract is structured so if everything checks out, and McCalmont Engineering will stay on as our engineer, as the owner's engineer for this, and so if things check out, then the contractor is on the hook for delivering that project. If it turns out there is something unforeseen that had they known about, they would have priced it differently, then the contractor has the right to say, look, we didn't know this was here. We need a change order on this project, but PCE has the right to approve it or not. So that, so effectively, if there's any change to the project, we have to approve, and that's effectively our out. If they simply come up on things that blow up the costs.
Thanks. So I think those are most of my questions. I am in support of what we're doing of this project. I just think that there are, even if PCE were to wind up in the end putting some additional money into this project, I think it makes sense to try to figure out how improve and move this forward. I think first attempts always can be difficult, so I appreciate all the time you guys have put into it. I just wanted to understand a little better how we're potentially addressing some of the financial pitfalls, and your explanation on the operations and maintenance, I think I can live with in terms of how you got that. Yeah.
Just slightly additional context, these are really perceptive and important questions. I think from our perspective, the question is, do we budget 10% contingency now that effectively creates a higher PPA price for everybody, right? Yeah. Versus using our ability to exit the project as risk management and therefore keeping the lowest PPA price. And if it turns out there's a site that has, there's a stream running underneath it and they have to do something before they can put those carports in, we could say, okay, how much is it going to cost? Okay, well, that'll increase that site. Well, can we reach an agreement with them where we increase the PPA price to account for those costs and they still get savings and want to move forward? Yeah. I still think we've maximized the overall good of everybody in that doing it this way, by having, our risk management being, hey, we can walk if the price is too high.
That's it. That sounds fine. I mean, it sounds like there's an opportunity somewhere, or a possibility somewhere, if things price out of control before construction, you all can say, well, yeah, maybe there's a negotiation on the PPA. So I'm comfortable with that. Dave, thanks for all this great work. I know it's taken a while for you guys to put this together, and appreciate the presentation and all the time that all the staff has put into getting this to go.
Thank you.
It's probably worth flagging at this point also that while this round has come off of PCE's balance sheet, as it were, from a capital standpoint, looking at subsequent rounds, it's likely that we will need to look at external capital sources and then pass through some cost of capital. We're still evaluating that for the next round, but that's very possibly a path we'll have to take.
Yeah, this is a sweet deal, I think, for all those folks who are in on the ground floor on this. I think they're going to get a really sweet deal.
It is a fantastic deal. Yep.
Okay, Christine, you're muted.
Sorry, thank you. I'm really excited about this program, and Pacifica is one of the partner agencies, and I just want to thank you for all your work on it. One follow-up question to Carlos. So sometimes additional costs aren't known until construction starts, right? We find, some substandard structural work or some electrical thing breaks down, and so how are those recouped, once the contract is already signed and the contractor is already there?
Right.
And then I have another minor little question about Pacifica afterwards.
Yeah, sure. So there are, like, if it's a really small dollar value, that effectively can get absorbed either by the customer, depending on who would really be responsible for it. And again, the contingency that we have in there is to give us some flexibility. If it's a slight increase in cost, then we could potentially fund that from our contingency funds. And again, we have the right to approve we have the right and obligation to approve anything. So it's not like a cost can be imposed on us that we are then required to bear. We have the right to approve it. And then, again, if it turns out there's a very expensive mitigation or something that needs to happen that we didn't know, and we have done mitigation. We've done site walks at all these sites. We've had a structural engineer look at all the sites. So I mean, it's not like we have no idea. These are pretty well vetted in the grand scheme of projects at this point. But if it does turn out that there is an expensive mitigation that needs to happen, again, the EPC contractor would tell us about it. They would estimate, whatever they would figure out how they would change the design or how they would mitigate it, what the cost would be. And then we have the right to either approve it. And if we were going to approve it, presumably we would see, okay, well, if we absorb that cost, how much would we would probably want to increase the PPA price at that site to account for that site specific cost. And so that would be, we'd have to go back to the city that owns that building and say, look, we didn't know there was this thing here. It's going to cost this much. It'll, change your PPA price. Do you still want to move forward? And we could, and if the cost of whatever that thing is means that the PPA price means they're not going to save any money, then they'll say no. But we still are. I mean, some of these sites are going to save 50% on their energy bills based on the rate they're on. So there still is a lot of, there still is the potential for, a site to absorb that cost and still save money and still move forward. But there's no obligation to, either for us or for the customer.
Yeah, obviously gets a little more complicated if the project's halfway through and something's discovered, right?
Well, I mean, the EPC contractor, they have to work, they can't just halfway through the project say, we didn't know something that they reasonably should have known at the start. So, and again, we're putting solar on roofs and we're putting carports. It's still relatively simple construction in the grand scheme of things. So, you know, I think there's due diligence that they need to do, but then they are responsible for moving forward on it. And, you know, certainly if they got to a point where they say, hey, we can't move forward, you know, at that point, there's mechanisms in the contract for dispute resolution, and, you know, we have to go through that. But I mean, you know, it's just, the reality is that we don't know everything in advance, and, you know, we think that we have designed these contracts in a way that provide us, you know, sufficient protection in the event that things come up that we didn't know about, which of course is going to happen.
Okay, thank you. I appreciate that.
Okay, great.
And just the minor question. So just looking at in the packet. So I was just looking specifically at Pacifica, and so packet page 108 shows a solar and 60 kilowatt battery system. But then on the contract on page 156, it doesn't mention the battery. So I don't know if this is part of what you were discussing at the beginning, where some of the batteries were not.
I'm sorry, and the contract on page 156, is that the PPA contract?
Let me see. I'm sorry, I'm not sure what the document was.
Well, I still think I can answer your question. So Pacifica is a site that actually has I think a really solid battery design, because that site already has a critical load panel. It's already designed for a backup generator to be brought in. So we're basically tying into an existing backup circuit. We would, at this point, the question is, how can we probably wouldn't necessarily start with thinking that there needs to be a redesign, but more what price could we, how could we price that in a way that, you know, can work for the city. There are a couple sites where I think the sizing was driven by the desire of the facility folks to, you know, effectively have the absolute maximum that they could get in terms of backup duration, and I think, you know, we advised that we thought that was going to end up being a very pricey system, and they still want to move forward. But I think, you know, there are a couple of projects that will have to downsize. I don't know what's going to happen with Pacifica. That one, I think, is well sized for that building.
Okay. It's I just went back to check. So it's the Peninsula Clean Energy Authority form of master engineering, procurement and construction agreement that's missing the.
Okay, right. Yeah, we're in the process of really, like, on the EPC contract. So the contractor has bid in both the solar and the battery pricing. As I mentioned, we're effectively parallel path, but separating the two types of projects. And there is a little bit of tweaking going on for the EPC contract to figure out exactly how we do that. Like, we want to bind the contractor to the pricing they've offered for the system they've designed, but knowing that that's going to change. That pricing may not have been specified later on the assumption that some things are going to change.
Okay. All right. Thank you.
Okay. Any other questions or comments from members of the board? Dave, I think that was a great presentation, and just to the board, I think this is a really important project. We're putting our toes in the water on this. We're cutting new ground, and we're going to learn from. We've learned a lot already, and I think as we go through and deploy this, and I think it's great that we're getting these done under NEM 2, and hopefully the second cohort will get. At least many of them will get in under NEM 2 also. You don't have to build it, you just have to file for it. So I think this is a benefit to our communities and leverages the knowledge and information that PCE has, and we're going to learn from this to figure out how to better serve a broader group of customers in the future. We're going to learn a lot from this. So I think it's really a good effort. Let me see if there's any public comment. Okay, Tiger, but okay, go ahead, Tiger.
Good evening, everybody. I had another event to attend, so as a result, I am in the public this evening. while my colleague takes the reins for a moment and hopefully absorbs some knowledge for her new board interaction. So I just wanted to take a moment to say that thank you, Dave. That presentation was fabulous, and thank you, Raphael. I've had the opportunity to work with you a little bit backstage with this project, and it's just so good to see it coming to fruition. I think that initially, when it was explained to me anyway, I don't know if anyone else feels the same, even though there were nuances aplenty, it felt like it was fairly straightforward. And listening to that presentation, I really understood much deeper how much work went into this from the entire team. And so I really just wanted to say thank you for that, because I feel like we're very excited about this in Pacifica. Yesterday we had the meeting to hopefully get in on round 2, and it's fabulous to just see that it's coming to fruition, and amazing to see the work that staff has put in on this. So thank you, thank you, thank you.
Great. Thank you, Tiger Jess. Is there any other public comment?
Chair DeGolia,
Yes.
This is Nellie. Mark Roast has some written comments
Okay.
that I can share. Let's see. So I'm just trying to see which apply to this item.
Can you post them in the chat, Nellie?
I can. It looks like there might be a character limit in the chat. I'm not sure if that's accurate. I can give that a try.
Well, we would have had a character limit on Mark if he had spoken.
Not fair, Rick. He's not in
Okay.
the room.
I know. That's why I was laughing.
So I did post all of the comments.
Okay,
I
great.
know, oh, actually. No, that wasn't all of the oh yeah, it was. Okay. I do know specifically here, he notes on slide 65, we may be able to supply those batteries to you by September from smaller production volume, maybe $80 per kilowatt hour. If these cost surprises show up, we may be able to cut the solar costs, for example, if we can be plugged into the contract in place of the conventional manufacturer. So I do think that was about this item, but the full comments that he provided, oh, my mistake, are sent to everyone right now. So you should be able to read them in the chat.
Okay, great. Thank you. Is there any other public comment? Okay, and is there any other questions from members of the board? Seeing none.
Mr. Chair, I'll move the item. Would you like me to
Yes.
actually read them, or just you know, that we delegate the authority to the Chief Executive Officer to execute the resos and the engineering, procurement, and construction contract with Intermountain Electric Company for an amount not to exceed $10 million, and to execute power purchase agreements with participating jurisdictions for a term of 20 years to sell energy generated from these systems.
Great. Thank you, Carlos.
I will second that.
Okay, thanks, Harvey. Could we do a roll call, please?
I think that was Jeff. Is that Jeff?
It was Harvey and
It was
Jeff.
both of
Oh.
us. Harvey, yeah, Harvey. Fine by me.
For the official record, is it Director Alfs or Director Rarback?
Director Rohrbeck.
Okay, thank you. Oops. San Mateo County,
Yes.
San Mateo County, Atherton,
Yes.
Belmont,
Yes.
Brisbane,
Yes.
Burlingame,
Yes.
Colma, Daly City,
Yes.
East Palo Alto,
Yes, and proud to be seconded by Director Roback.
Foster City,
Yes.
Half Moon Bay,
Yes.
Hillsborough,
Yes.
Los Banos, Menlo Park,
Yes.
Millbrae, Pacifica,
Yes.
Portola Valley,
Yes.
Redwood City.
Yes.
Oh, I lost my button. San Bruno,
Yes.
San Carlos,
Yes.
San Mateo,
Yes.
South San Francisco, and Woodside. The motion passes. Thank you.
I'm muted. The last item on the agenda is board member reports. And I don't see anyone's hand up. So I'd like to just end the meeting on a note of silence and respect for this incredible tragedy that has happened in Half Moon Bay this week, and that I know that all of the coming. I know this has been a very tough thing to happen and for all of us to have to bear, and wish that we had policies that would avoid this, but we don't. Okay, thank you, everybody. Nice to see you. Glad to have so many new members and really appreciate your participation. It'll only get better as time passes. We will see you next month.
Good night,
Thank
everyone.
you.
Thank you.